Welcome to the RevRoom. I'm your host, Rachel Bryant. Join me each episode as we discuss the strategies of top marketing practitioners, uncovering the tactics that transform ideas into revenue. Whether you're a seasoned marketer or an aspiring leader, the RevRoom is your go-to source for actionable advice and industry trends. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and enjoy this episode. Hey, Revenue Room listeners. Rachel here, and today we're tackling the elephant in the B2B marketing room. You know, that nagging feeling that your MQL strategy just isn't cutting it anymore? Well, you're not alone, and we're about to get real about it. As we've discussed, B2B buying has fundamentally changed, but most of our marketing playbooks are still stuck in 2015. We're seeing this across our client base here at Inverta, marketing teams grinding out MQLs while sales teams are trying to navigate complex buying committees. It's like trying to play chess with checkers pieces. That's why I'm beyond excited to bring you Jeremy Schwartz from Palo Alto Networks. He's not just talking about the shift from MQLs to buying groups, he actually did it. And spoiler alert, the results are pretty spectacular. We're diving deep into both the why and the how, because let's face it, we're all about practical strategies you can actually use, not theories that sit on a virtual shelf. Today we start with part one, the why, where we highlight the need for change and the way Jeremy worked across the organization to gain buy-in to start this transition. So grab your coffee, or hey, maybe something stronger, we won't judge. Let's dig into how to revolutionize your marketing strategy for the way B2B buying actually happens today. All right, well, welcome everybody to the Rev Room. I'm really excited about today's episode. We have Jeremy Schwartz from Palo Alto Networks with us to talk about transitioning from MQLs to MQAs and buying groups. So something we've been talking a lot about at Inverta, including here at the Rev Room and with our clients. So really excited to hear what Jeremy has to bring to the table. And we're going to talk about two different pieces around this in the why you would need to do this, and then the how you do it, and some of the examples that Jeremy's going to share with us about the way they've done it there and some of the results they've seen from it. So we're excited about the content today. So Jeremy, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and let them get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Jeremy Schwartz. I am the Senior Manager of Global Lead Management and Strategy at Palo Alto Networks. So we're the largest cybersecurity company in the world. So just a few things that we have to do there in operations. But what that really means, my team really oversees the health of the lead funnel and really makes sure that from an operational standpoint, things are working as designed. We're always looking for optimizations, and we're looking for, in the case of these buying groups, really big transformational things that we can do to really move the needle in a new direction.
Great. Well, excited to have you here. And you're a longtime friend of Inverta.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, great to have you on board. All right. We like to start the podcast with talking about our favorite mugs. I'm a big coffee drinker, so hence the mug piece. But if you brought something else, that's great too. So I'll share mine real quickly with the team. I have been bringing lots of different mugs. So I'm starting, like I've talked about before, I'm starting to run out of them. So I'm starting to steal my husband's mugs now. I don't know about you, but we have mine and his and shared ones as well. But I have my assistant regional manager, Dunder Mifflin mug today. I'm a big Office fan, as I'm sure most of the audience is as well. I don't know who isn't a big Office fan. So anyways, that's one of my favorite mugs. So I'll drink out of it throughout the episode today. But Jeremy, I know you brought something, so I'd love to have you
noticed
share
it's not
with
assistant
everybody.
to the regional manager, so that was great.
Yeah.
So it's afternoon, so I typically am drinking out of my water bottle, but I have two favorite coffee mugs. This one is my favorite right now. My dog is, my kids are grown up, so my dog is my kid now. And then generally in the morning, I have a really great another insulated coffee mug that I drink out of because it keeps my coffee hot all morning. So in the afternoon,
All right, we'll talk later about
make
that.
my cafe latte in the mug. This one.
For the afternoon pick me up.
Exactly.
Yes. No, my mug does say assistant to the regional manager. It comes in a little,
you can't even
kind of
see it.
hidden there.
Yes,
So
too.
anyways, yeah.
Great. I love that.
So that was my fault. I didn't deliver it correctly. So there you go. Thank you
that.
for that help on that, Jeremy. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, let's get into the content today. And I know the audience is hopefully as excited as I am because they're here listening. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about like why doesn't the traditional MQL work for B2B
Yeah,
anymore?
so the MQL model has been around for what 10, 15 years now since Serious Decisions introduced the water for the B2B revenue waterfall, and it worked for a while. I mean, it was when IT dollars were flowing and everybody just could say yes to everything. It worked because if you got a lead, you got an MQL, it usually could turn into something. Over the time, and especially over the last several years, most companies have seen a tightening of their IT budgets, which means more scrutiny, which means larger buying committees when you're deciding to purchase something. I mean, I remember times I could put things on my corporate credit card, and now I have to go through a very rigorous, buying request process. And at a large company like Palo Alto, you can imagine it takes quite a bit to go through, and anyone at any stage could say no to that. And that's internally. So that goes for externally, right? If we're looking to buy something, if we're looking to add on, a new tool or a new service, it really has to go through a lot of scrutiny. And so we know that that's happening through a buying committee, right? It's not one person deciding to buy Palo Alto. And in most cases, it's not one person if I'm deciding to buy marketing automation or, something else, right? And so,
Yep,
when we look at the MQL model, the biggest problem is the person who MQLs is usually the lowest man on the totem pole, right? He's
that's
the
right.
guy who has said, "Hey, Jeremy, go research this thing and tell me if it's worth looking further into." So I go and do a bunch of things, and that makes me an MQL. And even further, the bigger problem is that okay, so now I MQL'd, and I send my boss and his boss a link to a great document. Maybe I send this guy something else that I found, and each one of them does one thing. Well, what happens to a person who does one thing? Nothing. So when we
Right.
look at the buying committee, you have one guy who's engaged, who's the lowest guy and the least decision maker on the in the process. And then on the flip side, you have people who might lightly know about you, but they're not speaking to sales. And then the guys who are at the top, who are the executives. I know there's a number when my boss can sign for it, our VP can sign for it, and then it has to go up to leadership, right?
Yep.
If leadership never heard of what I'm asking for, why should I sign that? What's the business value? So
Mm-hmm.
having
Mm-hmm.
an MQL focused funnel is broken because we're really not speaking to the entire buying committee. And I think that's something that most marketers would agree to. I haven't heard anyone that I've met that said, no, that idea is not good. Now, everyone has varying degrees of what they think of MQLs, but no one I speak to about this thinks that focusing on buying groups and buying committees is a bad idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, we've talked about that a lot here, and we talked about it together. But we had Kerry Cunningham on our
Yes.
show about 3 or 4 months ago, and talked a lot about his research and what he's found. The other piece of what you're saying, I love what you're saying about the sort of low one on the totem pole is usually the one who MQLs, right? They do a bunch of things. Maybe they attend a webinar, download something, whatever. Um, even visit somebody at a trade show booth or something like that, right? It may not always be the decision maker, but so you're talking about
Correct.
a bigger committee. But the other piece of that is so many potential buyers might hit your website and they're not filling out forms, right? Like 3% of your traffic is filling out a form, but yet as marketers, we're still relying on dating everything and filling out a form, right?
Yeah,
So
the unknown visitors on the website are like the gold mine, right? Those are the people that, okay, I told my boss about your service. He went to your site. He spent a lot of time on your site. He shared it. You could have 10 people on the site, repeating visitors,
yeah,
and all anyone cares about is the MQL.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh. Well, Jeremy, I know you had an aha moment about like, hey, we've got to do something different. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
yeah. So my background is campaigns. I spent 10 plus years, 15 years running campaigns, both from the agency side and then from the customer side. And demand gen is not rocket science, but there's a science to it. There's an art to it, right? And we all know that there's a tremendous amount of waste. There's a tremendous amount of false signal, things that I get gold on MQL counts, or I get gold on this, and quality whatever. I'll throw it over the fence, and it's sales problem. And so, I coming from the campaign side, I knew that, and having been in operations now for I've been in operations now for about 4 or 5 years. And the reason I moved to operations is to bring that knowledge to how we operate our funnel. And it's not lead management used to be about making sure Marketo is talking to Salesforce is talking to outreach, right? It is still that, but that's the technical run the business, make sure things are working portion. Looking at transformation like this is what we really try and do on my team. We think of ourselves as the strategic partner to sales and marketing within marketing operations. The aha moment for
Mhm.
me was when I came to Palo Alto Networks, and I've been here a little over 2 years now. I spent the first few months doing what we all do, looking around, finding what is the low hanging fruit, where are the problems, where are the fires that have to be put out, and of course saw the tremendous amount of waste that you see in any funnel, right? Bad conversion rates at the MQL level, bad conversion rates to opportunity, a lot of junk, a lot of invalid contact info and programs we're paying a lot of money for. So we start looking at that. And then I went to the Forrester conference in 23, and they were really focused. This is the first time I think they really put a lot of weight at the conference as a primary topic, excuse me, behind this concept of the buying group, the opportunity buying group, the B2B revenue
Mhm.
waterfall, moving from the demand gen, the
Mhm.
demand unit waterfall, right? The next evolution. And what it is, sales always has thought about buying groups, right? I know my accounts, I know my accounts, I know who the buying committee is, I know who I need to talk to, but do they know what they're doing? And then on the marketing side, marketing doesn't care about the buying committee. They care about number of MQLs, number of interactions. They care about here's my account list and here's my persona list, and give me 70% decision makers and 30% influencers. And we all know how that works out. And I'm listening to them talk about this concept of using Signal. And I've been a demand based user, and it doesn't matter if you're demand based or 6 Sense, but I've been an ABM tool user for a long time. And when you think about that, you're like, oh my gosh, we have so much Signal in there. And then you start to think about the idea of this idea of marketing qualified accounts, which is what we think about now on ABM, but really is not a useful construct, because what does
Mm.
we're the biggest cybersecurity company in the world. What are we at? I don't know, 15,000 people. And then what if Apple is a marketing qualified account for us with 100,000 people or more that they probably have, with all the solutions they have and all the solutions we have? What does that mean? They're a marketing qualified account. We have 50 or 100 or 1,000 contacts in Salesforce. What does that mean?
Sure.
Well, when you start
Mhm.
to look at Signal and you see which of that 100 or 1,000 contacts is actually engaging with us. Oh, this guy downloaded an ebook last week. This guy downloaded a solution brief 2 weeks ago. And you see the solutions they're oriented on. Oh, they're looking at our cloud solution. They're looking at our security SOC solution. And you can understand what the company is showing interest in based on that signal. Are there a lot of people on the website? Are there a lot of people filling out forms? Are there a lot of people researching us with third party intent, second party intent? Are there a lot of people who maybe are not filling out forms, but they're coming back to our website? We're seeing a lot of traffic from the same account, looking at the same product groupings.
Mhm.
And suddenly you say, wow, they're right. We can see this signal, and we could see it larger than the individual or just that marketing qualified account level. And that was it
Yep.
really when it struck me. And I remember I was slacking my manager, and I'm like, oh my God, I said, this is amazing. And it really was an eye opener. And when people who have been in marketing a long time, like I have, see this, you're like, oh, this is why I'm in marketing, because it can be fun and new and exciting again, all over. And I think of this now as the next seismic shift in marketing, like when ABM was first introduced 10, 15 years. And even
Yeah.
before that, 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, when pixel tracking was introduced. Oh my God, you could put a pixel and know who the guy clicked on an email or whatever we were tracking at that time. So primitive. But it really is that way because you're now able to see inside the account, right? And that takes ABM to another level, I think.
Yes. Yeah. That's great. So, okay, so you go to the Forrester conference and you hear all this and you're slacking your manager and you're like, this is awesome. How do you come back with this awesome idea and the energy behind it and start building sort of consensus to try some things and starting to convince people internally, like, this is something we want to start to
Yeah,
do?
that's a great question. It's hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If you're building
Yeah.
a new company, you're a startup, build a new company from the ground up, new Salesforce, new Marketo, new whatever. That's awesome. You can do it from the ground up. If you work for a small organization, there's less barrier, but it's still not easy.
Mm.
Transformation from an MQL based funnel to a buying group funnel takes a lot of effort. And so when I came back from that conference and started to talk about it to my team, my immediate team and my immediate leadership, you know, we started to do some research and we said, well, what are we doing inside our company right now? And do we know who our buying groups are? I work in a people, processes, systems approach. Who are the people, when I ran campaigns, who are the people we're targeting, right? So in this case, we're like, well, do we know the people, the buying group that we're trying to target? And a lot of companies don't. They're like, yeah, everyone in IT. But that's not true.
No.
The second part is who internally has to be part of this. So obviously, you know, BDRs and campaign managers at the very core of it. And then, sales, field sales and sales leaders and campaign managers and campaign leaders, and all of that we start to think about, okay, those are the people. Now, how do you go about doing this? Like what would you need to do to build a buying group? And what that really comes down to is, how do you collect the signals and understand what's happening within an account in order to one be able to look at that from a marketing perspective. But what we learned is actually more importantly, how do you set the baseline for sales to be able to work in this manner? How would if a we're in marketing, we're very close to the BDR team, XDR, SDR, whatever anyone calls them, and we said, well, if we sent a marketing qualified lead to a BDR and we wanted them to, there's two motions. One is build a new buying group. There's no opportunity open for this account. What would I do to build a buying group and build an opportunity around a buying group? And the second one is, well, oh, there
Yeah.
is an open opportunity. How would I extend that? How would I take this new MQL I got and get it to that opportunity and make it mean something? So, those were the two things we thought about first. Who are the people, and like what would we have to do to sort of operationally make this capable? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I'm sure not everybody was like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's go do it." So what kind of resistance did you run
Yeah,
into there?
absolutely. So we started doing that research. We put, because we wanted to have some information before we started talking to people or talking about it.
Yeah.
And, we started to talk to our immediate leadership, our VP, and, VP of growth marketing. So he owns operations, but he also owns campaigns and he also owns, analytics. So, he's like, well, he goes, that sounds interesting. Why don't you run some pilots? Okay. So, fine. I'm in operations. I'm just a manager. I can't just say, let me go talk to the CMO. So he said, run some pilots. He
Yeah.
he was interested, but it's like, Terry from Forrester says it a lot. He's like, people go, oh yeah, that's cute. Go try it out and tell me how it goes. So we said, okay, if we want to do this, we need to identify these people and we need to figure out how we're going to do this. And so we're lucky. Our team had access to. We had our buying groups because our marketing data science team twice a year does an analysis of the past 2 years of closed won data and finds out who the personas
Mm.
were in those closed won deals. And there's a line: if you're above this percentage, these are the core buyers, and these are the secondary buyers for that product or solution. And you end up with
Mhm.
5 or 10 core buyers in each product or solution, and then a couple of bunch of others. There's always weird titles. There's ones that show up but they're lower than the threshold, so they're sort of secondary importance, and then there's always the weirdo titles that are in there. And so we were lucky to have that. But anybody can do this. Anybody can. If you don't have the data, you can do the industry standards, and Forrester can help with that.
Mhm.
But if you have data, you can look at your own data, your own closed won data, and those are the people. Those are the people that should be involved
Yeah.
in your buying group. The second side was, okay, who are the people internally? And well, we knew if we started with marketers, that would be really hard. And then if they started to actually do it, where would those leads go and how would they operate? So we knew we had to start with the BDR team, the sales team. And so we went to the BDR leaders and we said, we want to do this. We think it'll be exciting. It'll be really cool to see. And what we had was what you typically have, which is some people who say, yeah, that's awesome. That's a great idea. We want to do it. Some people said, let me know how it goes. And some people said, I don't really care about that. I'm busy doing what I'm doing here.
Mhm.
And so, we were able to line up some teams that were representative of all of our products and across our different theaters. So, not every product in every theater, but we had coverage across the globe for different products and services and different team structures. We had some enterprise teams, we had some commercial teams, things like that. And that was neat. So, so at this point now, it's like this is really something that's important to talk about is this is the right way to do it, by the way, because if you plan for 2 years and build something for another year, it might not work because it's
Yeah.
again, when you're transforming, I'm a military historian, and if you can't attack frontal assault, sometimes you have to come around a flank with a secondary plan. And this really we experienced a lot of that. So when I say this, one thing I wish I would have done earlier was maybe start talking to some of the marketers earlier, but
Mm.
I didn't have any data to share with them. It was this idea, this crazy idea. So it's like I think you can do more on that side, but it's always going to be harder there, and I'll come back to that. But this idea of doing it organically is really important, and being very nimble and what do they say at Facebook? Fail fast, right? So you try it. If it doesn't work, change gears, try it a different way. And so we had
Mhm.
this sort of not executive buy-in, but we had our leadership's buy-in. We had the teams that we wanted to participate, and we knew our buyer groups. And now we started to go, okay, well, if we want to do this, how would they build the buyer group? How would they extend the buyer group? And that was a really interesting process to go through. I mean, we said, well, they get a lead. If they want to go find more, how do they do that? Oh my God, you go to Salesforce, it's a mess. Well, why don't we use demand base? And so, we were able to
Mm.
create filters in demand base to show real people from an account who had interacted with a particular product within a recent time frame. And that shrunk the list from 1,000 people and signals to two or three or five, four or five. And suddenly they're like,
Yeah.
okay, and then they had to take ownership of those people manually. And then we use outreach, and whether you use outreach or you use Gong, it doesn't matter. But you can start to multi-thread them. And what we saw immediately was when you personalize outreach, whether email or phone call or LinkedIn, and you reference someone's coworkers, the response rates went up. So that was immediately, that
Mm.
was one of the first signals we saw that we were on the right track. And so that was the for building. They How do I collect a buying group and start to work on multiple people? And now we had another problem, which was okay if I set that meeting, how do I build an up? Our BDRs are able to create omitted opportunities, and they assign those to a sales rep, and they set the meeting. And so we're like, well, how would he add
Mhm.
more than one person? And that was a whole other process. So that was another 8 step to add a person to an existing opportunity. You have to first take ownership of that person, which is a whole thing in Salesforce. You have to create a
Sure.
campaign and take ownership, and then then when they want to add them, they have to add a contact, an opportunity contact role, set the type, set those fields, set those values. You had to stamp the campaign member, change the status of the lead or contact. It was a lot of steps, and we actually lost some people in the
Yeah.
pilot because it was some of these steps to go to demand base and take this extra time to add these extra people to the op. And we heard a lot of, I don't get KSO'd on that, I don't get comped on that. But the people that got it stuck with it. And so we said, okay, and the same goes for extending an opportunity. That last part about if I got an MQL, the second lead syndrome, Terry from Forrester calls it, Amy from Forrester. If I got that second lead, what we used to do previously was we would tag it as already engaged with sales, existing opportunity, and it would go back to nurture. And
Right.
it was a lost, I live in Florida. We'd say it's like catch and release. It's a lost
Yeah.
lead. You paid money for a lead, and yeah, you'll get fuzzy match credit, but how does that help the sale? So we said, look, if you
Yeah.
get an MQL, why don't you ask the seller, the owner of the opportunity, if they'd like you to either add them or qualify them for you? Because the myth
Mhm.
of don't touch my open opportunities. And I call it a myth for
Yes.
a reason. When BDRs started reaching out to field sales reps and even beyond RSMs, they would say, hey, I got this guy. He's a VP of cloud architecture. He just downloaded a total cost of ownership ebook. Do you want me to add him to your opportunity? Do you want me to call on him, qualify him? And half the time they would say, yeah, call him and qualify him. That's awesome. Half the time they'd say, no, no, just add him to the opportunity. That's awesome. I have a meeting with him next week. Now I know what to talk about. So
There you
immediately
go.
the myth was dispelled, and it created this better partnership between the BDRs and the sellers, because now we're enriching their existing opportunities. Oh my God, I need that person. Yes,
Yeah.
I know him because I know the people in my account, but they don't know what they're doing. And now by giving them this context, it created this tremendous wave of goodwill between the sellers and the BDRs. Like, yes, can you do more of that?
Mm,
Could you find more of those for me? And it was really another early signal that we were on the right track.
yeah.
I know I said
Yeah.
a lot. I'll see if there's any question you have for me there.
No, I would love to go back to the decision around starting with the BDRs. Like, tell me a little bit about like what ended up. Why did you land
Yeah.
there as your starting
So
point?
we're very close to the BDRs. And like I said, if you start with marketing, and there's a whole thing about how do you target buying groups in marketing, and I will come to that. But if we started marketing and marketing started driving buying groups, and BDRs were still
Mm,
MQL focused, they wouldn't. Where would it go? It would dead end. Right? It would
yeah.
end up at a dead
Yeah.
end with nowhere to go. And so that was really, we started talking to marketers about the buying groups and this concept of what we were trying to do and how it would really help them, because it would reduce negative MQL disposition, it would increase pipeline value. And so they were interested early, but they wanted to see it. They wanted to understand it. If I'm going to run something, I want the immediate value. And they're super gold on MQLs. So we were like,
Of
we
course.
knew from there, and Forrester also recommended it. They're really that, we were, that was the other thing that I haven't mentioned really. Forrester was a tremendous partner to us from day one. We said, I came back from the conference and I said, we want to do this. We set up bi-weekly meetings with them, our team and their team, and talk through these ideas and concepts that now seem so natural to me. But at the time,
Mm,
we were trying to really figure it out. And what's neat is anyone who's getting started on this journey should talk to Forrester, talk to them, get them to really lay out this concept for them, because
mm,
I can talk about the how we did it, but if you really need to understand the value, and in some orgs, smaller orgs with a CRO who understand this, we're a
yeah.
traditional org that still has a somewhat separated marketing and sales team. We in marketing are more responsible for pipeline than in the past. We are more concerned with what's happening with the opportunity, excel, progression, but it's
Mm-hmm.
even after a year and a half of doing this, we're just now starting to transforming into having marketing metrics that are focused on buying groups.
Sure.
Because we're big enough
Yeah.
now, but
That's a hard shift.
I'm jumping ahead, but we are big enough now that we're seeing that. But that's why we did start with the BDRs and the sales teams, because we knew that we had to have
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, an endpoint. Because the idea was building
Yeah.
an opportunity that had buying groups on them. And if we had no
Yeah.
motion for that, it would dead end with single MQLs, just rebounding back
Yeah.
to the nurture.
Yeah, and I don't know how big your BDR team. I imagine you've got a good chunk of individuals. Did you run the pilots with like where was every BDR involved in the pilots? You said every product and most of your theaters, right?
Yeah,
But
no, it was
where is it
not.
just a handful of your
It was limited
BDRs? Okay.
teams, so we had limited teams in each
Yeah.
theater that represented different segments and different product groups. So we had coverage,
Yeah.
but we had some teams that, like I said, and this is with anything, any adoption of change in an organization. The early Think about the iPhone. You have a friend who goes out and waits in line to buy that phone the first day. If you're like me, you wait maybe
Mm-hmm.
a month, right? You wait and see if you get a month, 2 months, let the kinks get worked out by someone else. And then there's the third
Yeah.
group that's like, I'll get it 2 years down the road when my current phone breaks. And so,
Yeah.
that was the same way with the BDR orgs. The ones that got it, because what we would say to them is, well, you get comped on creating the opportunity and setting the meeting, and don't you also get comped? Part of your comp is on if the deal closes, and they're like, oh yes. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, so by doing buying groups, you stand a better chance of a deal you create closing. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they talk
Mm-hmm.
around, you're not getting comped for doing research and demand base. Well, if you do, and we also saw things like they would create the meeting not with the original MQL, but with one of these people that they farmed out of demand base. And that was really
Yeah.
cool too, is that we all this evidence was starting to stack up, right? And so we ran this for a quarter. Like I said, we probably had our BDR org is, I want to say, it varies between 200 and 300 globally. Uh, so it's not
Okay.
a
Yeah. It's good
giant, but it's a
size.
pretty
Yeah.
decent size. For
Oh
an
yeah.
org our
Mm-hmm.
size, it's probably a little undersized even, but it's a pretty big size. We had maybe globally 10% of that, maybe 20 to 40, 20 to
Okay.
30 or 40 people at the most. And some people
Yeah.
dropped out because they were like, oh, it's too much work for me. But
Yeah.
we did that for a quarter. And at the end of the quarter, every metric was up. Every single metric was up and to the right. Opportunity
Yeah.
creation, uh, moving out of omitted, like the seller took the meeting and it moved out of omitted into pipeline. And one of the reasons for that was because the opportunities were suddenly much more interesting to the sellers. Instead of a meeting with a
Mm.
networking admin that they could care less about, well, you have a meeting with his boss and his boss also. So there's three people in the meeting, not one. And there are guys who can actually have a conversation and maybe make a decision. And so they would suddenly take more
Yes.
of those meetings and not ignore the BDR created ops. They would suddenly move them into pipeline, which was awesome, into stage one. And people were like, oh my gosh. And we saw that it progressed also. We saw a couple of deals that closed and it looked anecdotally like they were closing more, but it was in a quarter. Our org sales cycle is large. So it was anecdotal at best there, but all the evidence was showing, and the deal sizes were bigger too. So we were like, wow, this is
Hmm.
amazing. So we went back to our VP
Yeah.
and we said, here's the results. Can we talk to our CMO now? And he goes, yeah, let's get some time with him. So we got some time with, and we're a big org. Sometimes it's hard to get time with the CMO. So we put together a great deck and we showed him, and it was almost the same thing. He looked at it and he goes, this is really interesting. You know, like I said, what Terry says, oh, that's cute. He says, but it seems small. Like we put the conversion rates,
Mm.
which were all high, but the numbers, the pipeline numbers, you know, he always said, if it's not $100 million, you know, it's don't bring it to my attention. I'm like, okay, whatever, you know. So we said, all right. He says, but it's interesting. So we went back and we went to our data science team, and this is something else I advise people to do: is we extrapolated that data against the previous year, 4 quarters worth of actuals, and we were like, wow,
Hmm.
the pipeline, the revenue, and we went back to our CMO and we said, hey, just so you know, we took your advice and we thought about that and we wanted to let you know that we ran this and we it didn't even focus on pipeline. We said if this had been applied last year, it would have been a 13% increase in revenue for the company. And you can imagine that
Wow.
number at a company of our size, what 13% revenue is, right? And suddenly he was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. He goes, do more of that. So our
Hmm.
CMO said, do more of that now. Okay. And that was a really exciting moment because now, you know, he still wasn't saying, I'll be your executive sponsor or anything like that, but he liked it enough to tell us, do more of that, come back to me in another quarter. And so that's where we ended our first phase of our pilot. So it took us that took us all 6 months because it was about 3 months of planning and it was about 3 months. That first pilot was 3 months, and it was so that
Mm-hmm.
first 6 months. You know, we went to Forrester. I think it was June, beginning of June of 23, and this was the end of November of 23. So 6 months later, we that's where we presented.
You guys moved
It
fast,
was
though.
fast.
You know.
It was fast because we kept it small and very organic. And I come back to that again.
Yeah.
It's really important to
Yeah.
if this could be planned from the top, and I'm not saying it shouldn't, but I found tremendous results. Even if I had an executive sponsor and I was going to do this. Now I might work on the marketing and the sales side at the same time and try and accelerate both sides to get their motion going. But I'm a small team in marketing operations. I call it guerrilla marketing. I mean, that's what we've been doing for the last year and a half. And
Yeah.
you know, again, we're at scale now where the numbers that we're seeing, we're presenting in our QBRs now to our CMO.
Yeah.
So it's gotten to
That's
it's no
great.
longer cute, and I'll get to that next 6 months. But it was such an amazing experience, and we saw this works. We were telling Forrester. Forrester was amazed because they have this concept, and they've worked with other teams, but I don't think they worked with anyone of the scale of our size to try to make this
Yeah.
transformation. They were blown away, and they kept giving us. We were partnered with them on giving us tremendous guidance. So, I think that's what my advice for people. It comes back to the first question you asked me. My advice for people who want to get started with this is you have to understand what you're trying to do. What's your blue sky goal, of course? And I know where we're trying to get. We want to press a button and have a buying group created into an opportunity and activated it across the marketing and sales funnels. That's what we're working on now. but it's hard to get there. So start with that people, the processes, the systems are last. You haven't even heard me talk about the systems yet. So we did people and processes for that first 6 months. And then we started to think about what we would need to do from systems. Now that we saw people doing it manually, how would we automate and optimize that process? But at this point,
Yeah.
the results were really exciting. And so that's the key, I would say, is that you've got to understand the people, processes, and the systems. You've got to know what your long-term goal is, but what is the short-term steps you want to try and take? We knew we had to understand these processes, get your buying group in order. I've talked to plenty of people in my travels and talking about this where they don't have an identified buying group. And even me telling them, mine your own data, and they're like, wow, okay. So that's the first place. If you can get executive sponsorship, if you have if you're a director or a VP and you have the ear of your CMO, you should talk to the CMO and see if you can get executive buy-in from the ground floor up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you can't, you can do it as organically. It can be done. It just takes a little longer,
Yeah.
and it's harder when but it's also sometimes it's harder and sometimes it's easier because when you have a small team, you can move pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
that's where I'll stop there for a second because I want to let you ask any questions. But that's kind of the phase one was the result of phase one, and now we were going to start the planning for how we would really optimize and automate this and scale this to be global.
Yeah, I think that's really great. Thanks for tuning in to the RevRoom today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. For more, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Don't forget to follow Inverta on LinkedIn for more updates and exclusive content. That's Inverta, INVERTA. Have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover? Reach out and let us know. Until next time, keep innovating and driving that revenue growth. See you next time.